off your video if that's okay with you. There you go. All right. Okay. So, Dr. Khader, if you wanted to just kind of tell us about, I guess, your start, like, first things first, like, how did you find podiatry and how did you find yourself into, going to, I guess, yeah, just tell us about your kind of your education and training a little bit. It'd be a good place to start.
Yeah, sure. So, I think we'll start off by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All praise to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and peace and blessings to his final messenger. And wanted to start off by thanking everyone for taking your time and, joining us and learning maybe a few pearls of wisdom that I've acquired from other people and sort of made it my own. So I'm glad you're all here, and I'm happy you joined us. So my journey of podiatry actually started where I used to live in Chicago. There used to be a podiatrist literally in walking distance from my house. I always went by his office. Thought, I'm like, foot and ankle, that'd be interesting. So one day I kind of like walked into his office and just introduced myself. And I was thinking about going into medicine, not sure which area. So he really took me under his wing and kind of showed me the what he did and what podiatry was all about. And I kind of really fell in love with it. I thought, what a great life balance for someone who wants to practice medicine, but is not constantly on call. And I like that balance that he had. And one day, I wanted to have a family, and I wanted to be able to spend time with them because, as you well know, that over time is our biggest commodity. It's the most expensive commodity we all have to give. So that was a work balance, and I enjoyed the field as well. And over the years, I've just come to love it. I am a big proponent of podiatry. I love podiatry. I love everything about it. I think over the course of years, you just got to be positive and hang out with positive people that will mentor you and show you the positive parts of our profession. Because there are tons of people who, will have negative things to say. Just stay away from them. So I lived in Chicago all my life. I thought it might be a good idea to get away, and I went to Temple. And I chose Temple as my podiatry school. Had a great time there. Loved every minute of it. It was different because it was the first time I was away from home. So learned a lot there. And East Coast practices are different. They run differently. They're a lot more competitive for sure. Just because there are so many people there and so many podiatrists there, like any big city, I guess. Did Temple and got an offer at Loyola and Loyola Hines VA. Did my residency in Chicago. I was so grateful to be able to come back to Chicago and to practice there. And I got married as well, so it was a huge relief and a blessing. I always feel it's the residency that makes the physician, sort of the mold, right? So depending on what program you go to. That's why, yes, it's important to study hard in school, and yes, it's important to do well on your boards. But I tell you, I think finding the right residency and making sure that you found your niche in that residency is crucial. I really think that makes a physician's sort of core understanding of podiatry and foot and ankle surgery. So I did Loyola and I loved it. But after I was done with Loyola after 3 years, again, I wanted to find a place where I would be most profitable. Even though I have tons of family in Chicago, I wanted to stay in Chicago. But you have to sort of step back and say, I have X amount of years to practice. How do I make it the most efficient, and how do I make the most out of it, and still be not too far away from home? For me, Kentucky was only, if it's a 4.5 hour drive, it's nothing. It's pretty straightforward. I had family here, so it was more of a reason to come down, and I joined a single man practice, and it was good. I mean, I was with him for about 2.5 years. Then I thought, maybe I could do this differently. Maybe I can do it a little bit better. So I left him and started my own in 2008. So 2008, it's I can't believe where the time went. It's actually been 22 years since I graduated from school, and it goes by a blink of an eye. When people tell you time flies, it really does. I can't believe I have a 19-year-old in college. So started practicing, and I was really fortunate. I will tell you, here is the secret when you start your practice. Okay. And I had crickets when I opened my doors, but I will share this with everyone because this is the dua I made when I put the key into the lock and opened the door for the first time. And this is the dua I made. I said Bismillah first. I said Bismillah. I said, oh Allah, open the gates of blessings upon this practice and use me as your tool to help people who knock on this door. That's all I asked. And honestly, that dua has served me well from every office that I've opened. And we grew in the past 16 years from 2008 to now to the largest practice in podiatry in Kentucky. And over the course of time, it was just taking care of your patients. Honestly, patient care above all else, right? Patient care, irrespective of what background they come from. So over time, people have joined me, and my brother is in my practice, or in our practice, and then people who are really highly skilled and things that I was good at, I kept on promoting that, and things I was not good at, I went and found people that would be really good at that sort of specific area of podiatry. People in pediatrics, people in rear foot, people who love sports medicine. I just went in and Allah, guided them to my door, and I was so grateful. And they joined us, and other practices that were struggling. Eventually, they joined our practice as well. And then we thought, we need to have some sort of a legacy. You got to have some sort of way of giving back to your profession. And what better way to do that than to teach the new docs that are coming out? So we started a fellowship. I started that fellowship in 2017, 18. Then you have to know what you're good at, right? So you have to know what you're focusing on. So as I started focusing on the business part of it, I eventually handed the fellowship over to Dr. Klutz, who's your director, and Dr. Denzik, who's the co-director. And they love that. They love mentoring. They love to teach. And they're really great at it. So we started the fellowship. And as time went on, we had an orthopedic surgeon work for us for a year or so. We had an infectious disease doctor joined us and worked with us to give a sort of a comprehensive care to all our diabetics. And eventually things change over time. Our practice evolves and practice grows. Then eventually we got to a point where I needed help. I wanted to find a strategic partner to grow our practice. So I found a private equity firm. They're called Pace Setters. They're sort of isolated towards the south and southwest of the country, and they've been a great partner. So joined them, and they have bought several other practices in the area, and so that's who I'm part of right now. I'm sort of a mentor, and I've also been able to help the company grow, and that's the state I'm in right now. Is sort of enjoying being an employee rather than being an owner, because there's a lot of benefits of having sold to a private equity, because you don't have the headaches of the headaches of payroll. Over the course of those 20 years, my wife and I were blessed with 4 kids. We have a 19-year-old, a 16-year-old daughters, and twin boys that are 12.
Wow, mashallah. That's a really good summary. If you could try to summarize your 20 years in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe we can. I've got so many questions, and I'm sure other people do. And whoever has questions, feel free to just type them in, and we can just get to those. How you expressed a lot of you were really relieved to go to residency back home in Chicago. Did you look anywhere else? Did you apply in other areas? And how was the residency selection process for you?
So, okay, this is my sort of experience. So maybe you can learn from my experience. As I was going through the residency process, you got to drown out the crowd and you got to get rid of the noise, right? There's so many people who will sway you, will advise you. You got to go with your gut feeling of where you want to be and what kind of programs you want to be part of. I never wanted to practice sort of out of a large group practice. I didn't want that. I wanted a university environment. I wanted a university sort of backing of a residency that I would be exposed to seeing trauma, or I would be open to seeing plastic surgery, because there's so many things you can learn from them that apply to foot and ankle. So that was my goal. I wanted a university environment. So I went to Texas at San Antonio. Dr. Harkless was at that time running that program. Great program, great academics, but it wasn't for me. I knew that Texas was a great program, and it still is a great program, I'm sure. But it was a lot of diabetic wounds and a diabetic limb salvage. And I wanted maybe a little, more well-rounded program. And I did well there. And, once you start to know the attendings, and you should get to know the attendings sort of one-on-one, don't be afraid. Go up to them and let them know who you are. Don't pretend to be someone else. Just get them, that's who they select. Is this person teachable? Is this person going to handle criticism? Is this person going to handle the workload? Honestly, that's all they're looking for. You don't have to be the sharpest, the smartest tool all the time in the shed. It's the tool that learns and grows and sort of adapts to its environment is the one that survives, and that one that will shine. So for me, it was a focused decision to join a university that will allow me to have that. So I interviewed at Loyola. Actually, I didn't rotate at Loyola, and I just interviewed there. And because I wanted some pediatric exposure, I wanted to learn how to do some ped cases and not be isolated. So Dr. Ed Harris used to run that program back then. And they were well integrated. I think Loyola was integrated with orthopedics, PM&R, and physical therapy. And so I was really grateful to be able to at least interview with them. They had not selected anyone outside of Shoal. I'm not tooting my horn by any ways, but I don't know how, but maybe in the selection process, I was really fortunate. I'm grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I got that residency program. And the attendings were amazing. And there was a program in Philadelphia, which was part of Temple's residency program. So got to know people there and had a good sort of lay of the land that I wanted either Texas, Temple, or Loyola. And I ranked Loyola #1 because not only did I want to be home, but I wanted to be with Dr. Sage, with Dr. Edwin Harris. I wanted to be part of the orthopedic department because I'll tell you, my 3 years there, I learned a lot from our attendings there in podiatry, but I learned a ton of stuff from plastics. I know how to do a rotational graft. I know how to harvest a rotational graft. I know how to get a bone graft from any place. I worked with orthopedics. I used to scrub in on trauma cases. And people was like, what is this podiatrist hanging out and doing a hip? You know what? The fixation is fixation. You get to learn. Like I would scrub in on elbow cases because how many times are you going to learn, a tension band? How often do you see a tension band when things don't work? I advise you, if you're in residency, please get out of podiatry and go see other surgeries, scrub in on vascular cases, because those disciplines are the same disciplines that you would apply for surgery in any parts of the body. And you'll learn a lot. You learn a lot to improvise. You learn a lot to bring those techniques back to your own field, and it'll add value to being a surgeon. That's who you are at the end of the day. You are a surgeon, and you have to start behaving like it.
No, absolutely. I definitely echo a lot of what you're saying about your residency kind of predicting who or what kind of position you'll be, or at least your performance in residency, right? Because there's some people who kind of go into residency and kind of expect everything to be kind of handed to them. But the environment that you're in residency really kind of helps determine what kind of practitioner you're going to be. And so I definitely echo that. I also echo the feeling grateful about being able to go back home. Like that's such a huge blessing that I think a lot of people overlook. Or maybe, I mean, maybe it's not their priority, but for those who it is, I mean, you really have to think about what's important to you and what you need to do going forward and make those decisions. Sometimes they're really tough. So then you came to Kentucky after residency, and then you mentioned that you worked for someone for like a year or 2 years, right? And then you had some different ideas of what you wanted to do. Do you care to kind of elaborate a bit on that if you want? If not, we can talk about just starting your own.
So I think, irrespective of what training you come from or what school you come from, I think you always have to be a learner. Like you have to keep learning. You can learn from your patients. You can learn from someone who's been in podiatry for 40, 50 years, or someone who's been in podiatry for a few years, right? So everyone is going to teach you something. The person I joined here in Kentucky, he was good at business. He was good at, even though he didn't have any training, he was good at how to manage the business of podiatry and learning to keep the cost and knowing the cost of things. Like how many times you sit there and know the cost of what the ins and outs of running a practice are. So I think I learned a lot from him from that perspective. And for when I was with him, I was able to have certain doors open that wouldn't have opened for me. I was able to join and open a surgical hospital because I was part of him. I'm one of the founding members of Physicians Medical Center in New Albany. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I wasn't at that right place at the right time.
Sure. Okay. And then how do you recommend to people who are considering going to private practice, like kind of getting over that the fear of it not working out, going into debt? A lot of times people who are even like maybe purchasing a practice from someone, that's a huge investment and commitment. Like how do you what's that mindset like? Like what sort of mindset do you need to have when making a jump like that?
It comes down to what your risk tolerance are, right? And you have to know what your goals are. I think once you have clear goals, knowing what you're getting into and knowing how you're going to turn this practice around, if you're buying a practice or if you're starting your own practice, where will I practice? Location, demographics, knowing your patients, knowing the insurances, because Medicare doesn't pay same everywhere. It's different. Like if you practice in Mississippi, it pays a lot more for a bunion than it does for someone who practices in Chicago. And there are different payer mixes, right? So you got to know your area that you're going to practice in. So it's all about risk tolerance. How much are you willing to tolerate risk? And it's not just the risk, but it's also time. Everybody will ask you, say, how did you get here? How did you do it? Comes down to what are you willing to sacrifice to get there, right? So people are extremely successful, but they fail in their personal life. They end up with some sort of a divorce, or they have children that were neglected, this and that. So it all depends on your time. Time is the most valuable equity you have. So if you're going into practice, great. If you're going to buy someone's practice, Bismillah, you know what I mean? But you got to know what your goals and your focus are. If your focus is just on making money, I think you're going to achieve that, but it's going to come at a cost. It always comes at a cost. Either the cost of, you're building and buying a practice. You got to know, if you got to make sure you take care of your health. You got to make sure you take care of your personal responsibilities. You got to make sure you're praying your salah. You're making sure you're praying on time. You got to make sure.
Sorry, lost you there for a sec.
You have. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. What were some of the?
And
go ahead, please.
So I'll tell you one advice. If you're joining a practice or if you're buying someone's practice, I really would advise you to not only look at the numbers and look at the demographics of patients, but look who you're buying it from. Make sure they're ethical. Make sure they're kind, not only to their staff, but also to their patients.
Yeah.
Look at how they treat each other and what kind of environment you're walking into. Don't buy something because the numbers are great, but the environment is toxic. Or the person is toxic. And the only way you know that is by spending time with them.
Right. It is. I feel like that's very challenging to figure out, especially nowadays. I think the job market is competitive, and so a lot of people, especially if they have a geographic, boundary that they want to stay in, it's very difficult for some people to kind of triage practices. And a lot of people, I think, are taking positions and where they maybe aren't super comfortable with the leadership or whatever. And I mean, what sorts of I want to ask you what sort of advice you have for them, but I mean, there's not like a clear cut answer for that. If someone has a stipulation in their contract or their boss is not necessarily ethical, but then they want to stay close to home, like what are they supposed to do? I think that's
don't join them.
Yeah.
Don't join them. Don't even do it. Don't compromise on your principles. You know what I mean? Like I said, I made a simple dua. You can make a simple dua and just say Bismillah and start. I'll give you the recipe of what I've learned over 22 years. And then I think I've shared it with you. I don't care if you're sitting in New York. I don't care if you're sitting in Chicago or in rural Mississippi. There are simple three principles that I built my practice on. I'm going to share with you. And I think if you take it to heart and if you focus on it, you really find value in it and you'll be successful. I don't care if there is someone that is in practice for 40 years sitting next to you. If you follow these three principles, you're going to be successful. Okay, so that's the word I have used and I'll share with you. So it comes down to, I call them the 3 A's of success. The 3 A's of success. If you follow these 3 A's, you're going to be successful. Number one is you have to be, if you start a practice, if you join a practice, number one is you have to be available for your patients. Availability is huge. How many times do you know that patients come to see someone, they're like, oh, okay, you know what? I only see patients from, 8 to 3 and I have to leave by 4. You're not available. Or someone who is a doctor who's constantly always in some sort of conference or traveling for meetings or doing something else, they're not available. Nobody's going to wait 6 weeks, 3 weeks to see somebody for heel pain. Or someone who is has such a busy schedule that they don't have enough room for new patients, or they are going home early, or they don't have certain extended hours, or maybe they don't have certain weekend hours. Availability. You got to be available for your patients. That's number one, right? Number two is the second A is you got to be affable. You got to be likable. If you're not likable, patients will go find someone else. How many times have you found physicians that are great at what they do, but they have a terrible bedside manner? You have to have an approachable, likable bedside manner, and that's how you'll grow. So you got to be available. You got to be affable, right? And the last one, I think it's by far the most important. I think if I had to pick one of the 3 A's, the triple A's of success. So the last A is you have to have ability. No matter if you're available, no matter how nice you are, but if you can't fix that fracture, if you cannot solve that ulcer, if you cannot take care of that Charcot patient, they will find someone else. And if you're not good at it, you should go back. Learning never stops. You should go back and learn. If you don't know how to do an ankle sculpt, please go take a course. If you don't know how to do external fixation, go learn. Go do a fixation course. You don't know how to do a total ankle, go do an ankle replacement course. Learning never stops. When did it ever stop? I will tell you, if there are physicians who are still doing the same bunion fixation, same sort of thing that they learned in residency, they have not learned anything. You got to learn, you got to evolve. I keep saying, make your own gumbo, make things that work for you, make things that you're good at, and stick with those things. If you're not good at it, go back and learn it. The 3 A's of success, availability, affability, and the ability to solve the problems.
Yeah. No, I would say to your second question, how many doctors have poor bedside manners? I would say probably the majority, honestly. It's and it plays such a big role in the way that your patients perceive you. Honestly, they don't really care. As long as I found that a lot of patients honestly just want to come and be heard, because a lot of them have experienced frustration because they're getting tossed around between different positions and no one's really kind of listening to them. I've definitely experienced a couple patients like that.
Yeah.
No, that the 3 A's is something I definitely try to take to heart and think about daily.
Yeah, and no matter system what system you practice in, you can practice in a hospital system like you are. You can practice in a university system or private practice, or even at the VA. I think these 3 A's should apply to every single facet. So wherever you're working.
Absolutely, that's a good segue. Actually, where do you see where do you predict podiatry to kind of be in the next 10, 15 years? And it's kind of an abstract question. I mean, you can think about it in terms of organizationally or just skill wise, ability, whatever, however you want to approach that.
So things are changing. Podiatry has been very fragmented throughout the country. People have had private practices, or they're working for a VA, working for. I think it is coming together because these private equity companies are sort of bringing all these practices together, standardizing their sort of care of patients and how they are taken care of and their systems of operations. All of that bringing it to a certain standard takes a lot of effort, and podiatry has never gone through such a phase. So I think in the next course of 5-10 years, I think most podiatrists will be working for some sort of a system. It has happened with every specialty you can think of. We think of GI or ophthalmology or dermatology, think of, or even cardiology. 10 years ago, used to be tons of cardiologists operating by themselves and doing their own thing, but now they're all part of the system. I think that's where it's headed. I think it's headed where most podiatrists will work for some sort of a system and not be independent. I think it's going to be difficult, right? And there's a lot more. You're going to be paid for your skill sets. I think a lot more integration is happening. People are joining systems that are going to be helpful to our profession. I think overall, that's where I think we're headed towards, working for some sort of a system.
Yeah. We had a question. Do you think AI is going to be used in podiatry in the future? And I guess to what capacity?
I mean, to some degree, it's already being used. I mean, look at your total ankle implants. I mean, how they are done through some sort of a CT guided, and the implant is molded to that patient-specific ankle. And I think, a lot of the diagnostics that we do, or a lot of the sort of the fixations that we might do for our patients, will probably be through those sort of systems of some sort of AI integrated help. I think, in my opinion, bunion surgery is going to come to a point where it probably is at a point right now where it's going to be, you put an X-ray into the system, it's going to spit out these particular fixations and how it should be fixed based on the patient's age and comorbidities and patient's bone density, and it's going to spit out. Here are a couple of options you should really consider.
Wow. Yeah, I could see that. You kind of stick your foot in like a little tube.
Yeah.
iPad based off the measurements. What you want?
Measurement over fracture. If you have a fracture, it's gonna fixate that fracture for you.
Yeah, for sure. That's really scary. I saw one for someone doing haircuts. They have a machine that they put around their head and it just kind of cuts your hair based off what you want. Someone is asking, is there a specific or significant encounter with a patient you've had that has profoundly affected you, or how you practice or handle patients that you can think of? Or
that's and there's so many patients you will. So listen, I'll tell you, as you get to know your patients, the patients should get to know you. You should be open. I tend to think of my patients when they visit me, like, as they're learning, as I'm learning of who they are, and they're going to learn a little bit about me. I think it helps, not only sharing your culture, sharing your religion. I'm okay with those things to share with them. I think that is part of your dawah. That's part of your sort of your attitude, your sort of manners towards them is so important. Never judge a patient just by the way they look. You know what I mean? I think there's so much depth to that patient or how that patient got there. I will say, I think most people underestimate our profession. They don't realize how much of an impact we have. So I'll share a story with you. I work in a small rural town, like it's called Elizabethtown, Kentucky. It's pretty small. It's a tri-county hospital there. So I was working one day, and this lady drags her husband into our office, and she goes, he has this thing on his back of his foot. He's just ignoring it, blah blah blah. And I just wanted to have it looked at. So I will tell you, I think as a profession, we don't biopsy things enough. We should biopsy more often. It's a simple punch biopsy. So this guy comes in, I'm like, look like a little cutaneous horn. I'm like, I don't think it's a cutaneous horn, but I'll just biopsy it because you're here, you've had it for a while. I did that, and it comes back as malignant sarcoma.
Wow.
And I refer him out. I was like, you know what? Okay, it's a malignant sarcoma. I'm going to refer you out. And 6 months later, I ran into his wife. The guy died. The guy died. It had spread everywhere, and it was just showing up in the foot. There was another. Okay, here's one. It was a cardiologist. This lady is a runner. She's a cardiologist. She's a runner, and she's running a marathon. And somebody sees some spot on the back of her leg. And she comes to me, a cardiologist. She's like, I got this little thing I don't see in the back of my calf. She had 3 kids, and I biopsied this little lesion in the back of her calf. Malignant melanoma. Gone within a year.
Wow.
Leaving 3 kids behind. I mean, you talk about how much of impact we have, and our profession is an amazing profession. I mean, 22 years into it, I'm telling you, it's an amazing profession. There is no reason to hang your head against anyone. You are an important cornerstone of healthcare. And I think there is so much to be learned by others, but there's so much to be learned from us on what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. SubhanAllah. Someone is asking, is it worth starting your own private practice if most podiatrists are competing with private equity groups or hospital-based groups?
So yeah, that's a personal question that goes back to your risk tolerance. If you're able to handle the business part of it, I didn't have any business sort of background. I was always in medicine or in healthcare. Didn't have any business background, so kind of learned things the hard way. Learned certain mistakes. My advice is no. I would not start a private practice by myself. I think it's a very tough environment to start your own private practice. You're going to be great maybe, initially when you start off, but time will wear on you. It's going to be hard to compete with hospitals and private and different large groups, unless, this is the only caveat I have, unless you start in a rural part of the country. If you say, I want to start my private practice, I want to be successful at it, fine. Find a place that is rural, and I think you're going to be successful. Big cities, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a tough challenge. Find a place where it's underserved. Find a place where there are not many podiatrists. And if you're willing to live there and you're going to be happy living there, then that's where I would start a private practice.
That's actually a great segue to the next question, because oftentimes when you live in those areas where there's not many podiatrists, there's usually not that many other people of color, or at least, definitely not Muslims. So how would you handle encounters where patients bring up uncomfortable topics like religion or geopolitical issues? Or, I've had encounters where patients are like, oh, I've never seen a doctor of your kind, or, what I mean? Something like that. Like, how do you handle that or how have you handled that in the past?
It's a tough question, right? I mean, I live in Kentucky, and it comes up. Racism is there, but I think you got to treat it very professionally, and I think you got to treat it with kindness, and not confront them. Never. I try to stay away from bringing up specific opinions about religion and their beliefs, and specific things about political beliefs. Try to stay out of it. You know what I mean? Don't get involved with it. And people are going to bring that up over and over again. Try not to get into the point where you're discussing politics while you're taking care of their ingrown toenail. It's not worth it. So just be kind and be respectful. And if they're not giving you that same respect, then Don't keep him as a patient.
Mhm. Have you had
The
any other?
patients have the right to come to see you.
Yeah.
You have the right to see the patient.
Or not see a patient, right?
Or not see them.
Yeah.
So if they knock on your door, just remember that they have the right to see you. You also have the right to see them.
You've pretty much been owner, right, for a while until you recently sold to the private equity, correct? So this question might not be as pertinent, but have you had situations where you've come across like uncomfortable encounters with even your own partners or someone that you work with, and how do you, like, mainly I guess let's talk about religion. Have you handled those, if at all?
Specifically about religion, I try to educate my coworkers, my partners in regards to who I am, and they all know. Living in a small town in Kentucky, they all know about Eid. They all know about Ramadan coming, how the schedule has to be modified, and they know I take time out to pray my salah. You know what I mean? They know that, but you just got to be open to, show them. There's nothing wrong with it. What you're doing is nothing wrong. It's and be open to that. I'm not saying go out there and start doing dawah to someone right off the bat, but I think just your actions will speak louder than the words. And I was very respectful, irrespective of what the people are. I've had physicians that are LGBTQ. I had physicians that are Jewish. I had physicians that are, Baptists, people who are Catholic. I respect all of them. I give them their own space. I don't share my opinion specifically about their religion, but I try to take every moment to discuss and what I'm doing and show them the actions of that.
Sure. No, that's great. And I think you've done a really good job with it. That's something that it was palpable when I walked in. The fellowship coordinator is like, oh, like we'll, accommodate your schedule during Ramadan, because I know from Dr. Khader that, you're probably going to want to take some time off. Like that was huge for me, honestly, walking in and just knowing that that's something that, I don't have to kind of dance around, and for me in residency, taking time off for Jummah was, it took a lot of courage for me to kind of bring that up to my attendings. I was also in Utah, so I think maybe things were a little bit easier in a sense where they were able to accommodate because they understand like religious obligations.
Yeah.
But it did take a lot for me to just work up the courage to ask someone, hey, I know I have clinic here, but can I take an hour out of my day here? And, I was able to very freely ask that to, Dr. Klutz and Dr. Denzig, and they were, very open to it. I think a lot of that has to do with their experiences or interactions with you. So, I have to definitely thank you for that, and for everyone else who, benefits from that, inshallah. So that's amazing. I don't want to cut too much into your evening. I know it's already past Maghrib time. Is there any, do you have any kind of like last, big picture or, mindset sort of advice for people, especially people who are in private practice or looking, to get some benefit out of?
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's about always constantly learning. Never think you just because you finished a residency program or you've done this and done that. Never stop learning. Always be open to learning from everyone, including infectious disease to ortho to whatever disciplines that are out there, and try to attend conferences that are just not podiatry conferences. For God's sake, go to a dermatology conference. You'll learn a ton of stuff from there. Go to a orthopedic conference if you can. That's what I would do. You try to work harder. Okay, here's the thing: try to work harder on yourself than you do at your job.
No, that's great.
And be clear of your goals. Irrespective if you're going to join a practice or if you can start a practice, just be clear of your goals and just remember what you're willing to sacrifice. If that sacrifice is worth it, then do it. Because you got to set goals for yourself and keep reaching for those goals. And it comes at a price.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to sacrifice and work hard, you can do it. And just learn to be thankful, learn to be grateful.
Okay, sure. I just thought of one more actually, and if don't you don't have to answer this if you don't are not comfortable with it. But what are maybe what's something that you wish you had done differently throughout the last 20 years? And if there's nothing, that's
There's so many things, right? There's so many things you have regrets about. If people say they have no regrets, that's just a bunch of crap. There are always regrets. I wish you did this and did that differently. I wish I was a better negotiator in certain contracts. I wish I was a better physician when it came to this specifically this diabetic patient or that fracture. I wish I did that bunion better. Why did I do that surgery on that little girl that's only 8 years old? I wish I had done this. I mean, guys, you're always going to have regrets for everything. But the key is you got to learn from those mistakes and not to do it again and move on.
Hmm.
Got to learn from those experiences is what makes you the physician. Remember, it's a practice. You're constantly practicing. You're constantly growing, and don't be afraid to learn. Don't. And at the end of the day, don't wish it was easy.
Hmm.
Wish you were better.
That's really good. I might have to frame that. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
No, mashallah, that's good. Well, and then we had another question, but I think we kind of covered it with private practice and versus hospital systems. But well, I mean, I think we could wrap it up.
Yeah.
We generally speaking, so I record this and I post it on the YouTube channel if you're okay with it. We have people, I guess, with ABFAS and stuff. People will probably watch it as
Sure.
in the upcoming days. But Jazakallah khair for your time, and if there's anything that you want to contribute to the Muslim Podiatry Network, it's not really an organization; it's more just us, gathering people, and we try to showcase when people are doing volunteering, or there's things for advocacy and things like that. So we, if you would love for for your involvement to some capacity, if you're open to it.
Absolutely. I think this is a great platform. I think you just continue to make it grow, and kudos to you to continue to build bridges and bring people together. You're only successful as your network. You got to make sure your network is vast and you have the right people that you are in contact with. But that's how you're going to allow it to grow.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to give a little shout out to the other organizers, to Muslim Podiatry Network, who are on and people who are not on. This is a joint effort. It's not something that I'm doing by myself by any means. So, jazakallah khair to everybody, and we'll wrap it up, inshallah.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.